This is the most desperate prison on Earth, and me and my 30 companions have been trapped here for 5 months. In order to survive, we can only move this water area in turn. Although we adults can reach 5 meters deep, can easily swim to the deep sea, but every 15 minutes we have to float to the surface of the water to breathe. This is the most natural and instinctive rhythm of life. But now it has trapped us, even the heavy shackles that can kill us. This ice cave is only dozens of square meters, and within 30 kilometers there is no second breath hole. This narrow cage is lonely on the frozen sea, like the eyes of a demon. It's all white around, can't see the edge, cold like a cold blade, quiet like a heavy stone, desperate like an invisible shackle. They build up a silent cage together, like swallowing our will to survive little by little. And that only breath hole has become the last barrier between our entire race and the dead god. The fish and shrimp under the hole have been eaten up by us. At this moment, hunger and cold are like two heartless demons eating my body crazily. I almost forgot why I was floating in this long and difficult situation. But the seawater keeps waking me up, who is about to fall asleep. We are frozen by instinct. We keep floating in this narrow area. Once the sea is completely frozen, all our efforts will turn into bubbles, and everything will be destroyed. Finally, the breath of spring has come. The hard ice starts to crack and crack, cracking a gap that symbolizes life. That's the way to freedom. But at the same time, it's also a new unknown test. The scattered ice has formed a flowing maze. Now we can only carefully walk through the ice. Once we choose the wrong direction, what awaits us is suffocation, staying in this ice field forever. At the same time, we rely on the sound to explore the way. The sound waves crash on the ice and then return to our ears. Every time we think back, it's a careful test, and it's also a hope. In the end, we successfully arrived at a vast ocean. The sun shines like a golden thread through the ice, and the surface of the water shines with a faint blue light. We are not the only visitors to this water area. After being trapped for several months, we have come here. We rarely meet each other, but now we share the same breath. At that moment, I felt a sense of intimacy that could not be expressed. The tragic fate of being trapped also created a deep resonance between us. We had a brief exchange and rest, and then we parted again. They headed for the northern sea, and we set foot on the way home. This is a long journey of more than 1,000 kilometers. On the way, we have to cross the icy ice. We also have to face the unknown deep sea challenge. In our hometown, there is a familiar sound wave calling, and there is a new life waiting anxiously. On the way, we keep calling each other in a unique way. That is our unique language. The sound wave is intertwined into an invisible net in the deep sea and connects each family member closely. As long as you hear that familiar frequency, you will feel a sense of warmth in your heart. 6 weeks later, we finally returned to our hometown, and the sea was covered by the white waves of life. More than 50,000 companions gathered here, breathing in the warm sunshine and enrolling happily. At that moment, I almost forgot the desperate cold under the ice. I looked at the little guy next to me. This is his first journey back to his hometown. He followed me closely, full of tension and dependence in his eyes. I was afraid that I would get lost in this vast water area. New life is breeding here, and old memories will also be slowly washed away by the waves of time. However, danger is still following. After the ice and snow melted, polar bears lost their hunting grounds. Hunger made them crazy and cruel. They forced into the coast, lurking on our path. I used my voice to detect his huge and terrifying figure. He was quietly waiting, ready to launch a fatal strike. When we approached the beach, the air suddenly became tense, as if a war was about to break out. The polar bear suddenly jumped into the water, causing a huge wave. We were scared to run away. My speed was 3 times that of the polar bear. I swam hard, while making a low-pitched alarm. I reminded my friends to avoid the danger, but at the same time, the tide was quietly retreating. The water level was getting lower and lower. It was like a terrible trap. The sand was gradually coming out. The child rushed over with a flexible body, but I was caught in the middle of the way. I fought hard to hit the tail flag. The seawater rose rapidly, causing only deep despair. The polar bear next to me, who was a little older than me, had stopped struggling. He was lying there quietly. But at this moment, the polar bear was getting closer and closer. The air in my chest was also decreasing little by little. The feeling of suffocation was getting stronger. Just when I felt desperate, I heard the child calling anxiously in the distance. The sound was small and rapid. It was coming from the wind and waves. I tried my best to respond to it, but the sound was drowned by the waves. Just when I was running out of strength, the polar bear next to me tried his last strength to hit me. He passed the hope of life to me without hesitation. I mobilized every inch of my body and struggled desperately. Even though the sand was like a sharp blade that cut through my skin, the blood gradually dispersed in the water. But I still rushed forward regardless of everything. Finally, my body was pulled up by the seawater again. I managed to get out of the water, but I couldn't get up again. He quietly stayed on the sand. It became a meal for the polar bear. I have no hatred, only a silent understanding. In this cruel polar world, every life has its own home. I dived into the sea again and swam away with the cry of the child. But the sound suddenly disappeared. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented fear. It was as if the whole world had collapsed. I tried my best to call again and again until the sound was gone. Suddenly, a faint echo was heard. It was him. He remembered my voice and the signal I gave him. When he came close to my body again, I seemed to breathe again. The cry between mother and son became the only warmth in this cold world. I know I'm just an insignificant passenger. The companion in front of me also continued his life in another way. It brought the polar bear back to life and allowed the order of the ocean to continue to cycle. When the seawater calmed down again, I slowly swam to the deep sea with my child. At that moment, the shallow pond that was dyed with blood was being swallowed up by the tide. The traces of life were quietly taken back by the sea. In this endless cycle, there is no real victory, only the continuation of life. Death is never the end, but a return to another form. The polar bear came back to life, and the waves continued to float happily, as if nothing had happened. But only we remember the moment of warmth, remember the last push of our companion. Everything the ocean teaches us is about acceptance, acceptance of loss, acceptance of fate, and acceptance of nature never favoring any side of calmness. But it is precisely because of this calmness that life becomes so passionate and precious. The child and I dived into the deep sea again, and the waves swam back and forth in the water, like a song of life that can never be sung out. In this vast and mysterious world, we are just two insignificant twins, but with the warmth of companionship, with the hope of a new life, we slowly move forward in the currents. Every end of life is a breakthrough for the desperate, and every breath is a praise for life. We struggled to survive in the ice cave, we faced life and death on the shallow beach, and we understood the importance of sacrifice. It turns out that there is no isolated life in this world, and all encounters, guardianship, and farewell are the essence of nature. Living is never a miracle of one person, but a resonance of a group of lives. It is the soul of the dead that turns into the low rain of the waves. It is the newborn baby that raises several times the amplitude. It is the inheritance and echo that never stops in this deep blue sea.